They told him to move to the back, not because his boarding pass was wrong, not because he'd caused trouble, but because a black man in a hoodie didn't look like he belonged in first class. What the flight attendant didn't know, what nobody on Atlantic Airways Flight 447 knew, was that the man she was humiliating owned part of the airline itself, and he wasn't going to stay quiet. Before the plane even took off, phones were recording, a live stream was rolling, and a billion-dollar company was about to face the reckoning it had been avoiding for decades. If you're watching from your city, drop a comment below. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Darius James Caldwell had learned a long time ago that the world would judge him in the first 3 seconds. It didn't matter that he held an MBA from Wharton, that he'd built a logistics empire from a single delivery truck, or that his net worth had quietly crept past 9 figures. What mattered, what always mattered, was what people saw first. A 38-year-old black man in a faded gray hoodie, scuffed Nikes, and a briefcase held together with duct tape. He'd worn the outfit on purpose, not to provoke, not to prove a point, but because after 16 hours of back-to-back investor meetings in New York, the last thing DJ wanted was another performance. The tailored suits, the calculated smiles, the careful code switching that made white boardrooms comfortable, all of it could wait until he landed in Chicago. For now, he just wanted to sit down, close his eyes, and let the hum of jet engines drown out the noise in his head. Atlantic Airways Flight 447 was scheduled to depart JFK at 6:15 p.m. DJ had booked seat 1A, first class aisle, because he'd learned years ago that legroom wasn't a luxury when you were 6'3". He'd checked in online, received his boarding pass on his phone, and cleared TSA pre-check without incident. Everything was routine. Until it wasn't. He was one of the first aboard, his platinum status card flashing green as he scanned through the gate. The jet bridge smelled like recycled air and burnt coffee. When he stepped onto the plane, a young flight attendant with a tight blonde ponytail and a name tag that read Brielle Knox looked up from her tablet. Her smile was bright and practiced. It died the second she saw him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Can I see your boarding pass?" DJ didn't flinch. He'd been through this before. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. Seat 1A. Brielle barely glanced at it. "That's first class." "I know." Her eyes flicked to his hoodie, his briefcase, his worn sneakers. Her mouth tightened. "Sir, I'm going to need you to move to the back of the plane." DJ felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the one that came every time he had to decide whether to fight or let it go. He kept his voice calm. "My boarding pass says 1A. That's this seat." "I don't think you understand," Brielle said, stepping closer. Her voice dropped, but it wasn't softer. It was colder. "Premium seating is for passengers who've purchased upgraded tickets. If there's been a mistake, we can rebook you in economy." "There's no mistake." "Sir?" "My name is Darius Caldwell." He pulled his wallet from his back pocket, flipped it open, and showed her his Atlantic Airways Platinum Elite card. "I've been a member for 6 years. My ticket is valid. My seat is 1A. Brielle stared at the card like it was written in a foreign language. Then she shook her head. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to need to verify this with my supervisor." "Go ahead." She didn't move. Instead, she raised her voice, just loud enough for the passengers behind DJ to hear. "Sir, I need you to step aside so we can board other guests." DJ felt the eyes on him. He turned slightly and saw a line of passengers stacked up in the jet bridge. A middle-aged white woman clutching a designer handbag, a man in a business suit checking his watch, a young couple whispering to each other, all of them staring. He stepped into the aisle. Brielle didn't call a supervisor. She walked past him, smiling brightly at the woman with the handbag. "Welcome aboard. Let me help you with that." DJ stood there, briefcase in hand, while passengers streamed past him. Some glanced at him with pity, others with irritation, as if he were the one holding up the line. One elderly man muttered, "Just sit down already," as he shuffled toward the back. DJ didn't sit down. He pulled out his phone and opened the camera app. He wasn't going to let this one go. "What?" Brielle returned 5 minutes later with a man in a crisp captain's uniform. His name tag read Grant Holloway, and he had the kind of square jaw and steely gaze that suggested he'd been told his whole life he looked like a leader. He sized DJ up in less than a second. "What seems to be the problem here?" Holloway's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like a teacher addressing a student who'd been sent to the principal's office. "No problem," DJ said evenly. "I'm sitting in my assigned seat. Your flight attendant asked me to move. I'm asking her to verify my ticket." Holloway glanced at Brielle. She leaned in and whispered something DJ couldn't hear. The captain's expression hardened. "Sir, do you have your boarding pass?" DJ held up his phone again. "Right here, seat 1A, Platinum Elite status, paid in full." Holloway didn't look at the screen. "I'm going to need to see a physical copy." "It's a digital boarding pass. That's how I checked in. And I'm telling you, I need a physical copy." DJ felt the heat rising in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Atlantic Airways accepts digital boarding passes. That's company policy. You know that." Holloway's jaw tightened. "I don't appreciate your tone. I don't appreciate being asked to show my papers 3 times while everyone else boards without question." The words hung in the air like smoke. Behind him, DJ heard someone gasp. He turned slightly and saw a woman in her 40s, Dr. Elaine Mercer, according to the medical ID clipped to her blazer, standing in the aisle with her arms crossed. "Excuse me," Dr. Mercer said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Why haven't you verified his documents? You've checked everyone else's boarding pass on their phones. Why is his different?" Holloway's face flushed. "Ma'am, I'm handling this." "You're not handling anything. You're profiling him." "I'm doing my job." "Your job is to verify tickets, not humiliate passengers." Brielle stepped forward, her voice tight. "Dr. Mercer, I'm going to have to ask you to take your seat." "I'll take my seat when you do your job." DJ felt something shift in the cabin. More passengers were watching now. Phones were coming out, not to scroll, but to record. He saw the red dots of live streams starting, the glow of screens multiplying like fireflies. Holloway must have seen it too because his expression went from irritation to alarm. "Everyone, please return to your seats. We'll resolve this quickly." "Then resolve it," Dr. Mercer said. "Scan his boarding pass, check his status, stop wasting everyone's time." Holloway turned to DJ. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step off the plane so we can verify your ticket with the gate agent." DJ didn't move. "You can verify it right here." "I'm not asking. And I'm not leaving." The cabin went silent. Even the hum of the ventilation system seemed to hold its breath. DJ raised his phone higher, making sure the camera caught Holloway's face. "For the record, I've shown you my boarding pass 3 times. I've shown you my status card. I've complied with every request. And you're asking me to leave the plane. Not because I've caused a disturbance, not because my ticket is invalid, but because you don't think I belong in first class." That's exactly what this is." DJ's voice was quiet, but it carried. "And everyone here knows it." Holloway's hand went to the radio clipped to his belt. "I'm calling security." "Go ahead, Tom." The security officers arrived 7 minutes later. 2 of them, a stocky man with a buzz cut and a younger woman with a bored expression. They boarded the plane like they'd done this 100 times before. The buzz-cut officer, his badge read L. Torres, looked at DJ, then at Holloway. "What's the situation?" "This passenger is refusing to comply with crew instructions," Holloway said. "That's not true," DJ said. "I've complied with every instruction. I've shown my boarding pass. I've shown my status card. I've asked them to verify my ticket, and they've refused." Torres looked at Brielle. "Did you scan his boarding pass?" Brielle hesitated. "He doesn't have a physical copy." "So scan the digital one." I didn't think it was legitimate." Torres stared at her. "You didn't think it was legitimate? It just seemed—" "Scan it." Brielle's face went red. She pulled out the handheld scanner from her belt, hands shaking slightly, and aimed it at DJ's phone. The device beeped. "Green light. Valid ticket. Seat 1A." The silence that followed was deafening. Torres looked at Holloway. "His ticket's valid." Holloway's jaw worked. "There may have been confusion." "There was no confusion," Dr. Mercer said from her seat. "There was discrimination." Torres sighed. He looked at DJ. "Sir, I'm sorry for the inconvenience. You're free to take your seat." DJ didn't move. I want this on record. It's noted. I want names. I want badge numbers. I want a formal complaint filed before this plane takes off. Torres glanced at his partner, who shrugged. You can file a complaint with the airline after you land. No. DJ's voice was firm. I'm filing it now, because if I don't, this gets buried. And the next person who doesn't look like they belong in first class goes through the same thing. Holloway stepped forward. Sir, if you don't sit down, I'm going to have to ask you to deplane. For what? My ticket is valid. I haven't broken any rules. You're the one who violated company policy by refusing to verify my documents. You're disrupting the flight. I'm standing up for myself. That's not a disruption. That's a right. Torres rubbed his temples. Look, man, I get it. But if the captain says you're disrupting the flight, I have to remove you. That's how this works. DJ looked around the cabin. Every phone was still recording. Every eye was still watching. He smiled, not with warmth, but with the cold certainty of someone who knew exactly what came next. Then remove me, he said. But everyone here is going to see what happens, and so is everyone watching online. They walked him off the plane. DJ moved slowly, deliberately, his phone recording every step. Behind him, he heard Dr. Mercer's voice. This is wrong. This is wrong. He heard other passengers murmuring, some agreeing, some complaining about the delay. He didn't look back. When they reached the gate, Torres gestured to a corner near the windows. Wait here. The supervisor's on her way. DJ leaned against the wall and checked his phone. The live stream had over 8,000 viewers. Comments were flooding in. This is disgusting. I'm never flying Atlantic again. Why are they treating him like a criminal? Because he's black. That's why. He didn't respond to any of them. He just kept the camera rolling. The supervisor arrived 10 minutes later. Her name was Monica Dale, and she had the look of someone who'd been pulled away from something more important. She glanced at DJ, then at Torres. What's going on? Torres explained. Monica listened, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she turned to DJ. Mr. Caldwell, I apologize for the confusion. We'd like to rebook you on the next available flight. I don't want to be rebooked. I want to board the flight I paid for. I understand, but given the situation, you have a valid ticket holder who was removed from a plane because your crew refused to verify his documents. That's not confusion. That's discrimination. Monica's smile tightened. Sir, I'm trying to help you. Then put me back on the plane. I can't do that. The captain has the final say on who boards, and he's determined you're a security risk. DJ laughed, a short, bitter sound. A security risk for asking you to do your job. Monica's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and then looked back at DJ. If you'd like to file a formal complaint, I can provide you with the appropriate forms. I don't want forms. I want accountability. Sir, do you know who I am? Monica blinked. No. DJ reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. He handed it to her. She read it. Her face went white. The card was simple. Darius J. Caldwell, CEO, Caldwell Group, Strategic Logistics and Corporate Partnerships, and beneath that, in smaller text, Principal Stakeholder, Atlantic Airways Corporate Accounts. Monica stared at the card like it might explode. DJ leaned in, his voice low and calm. My company books over 600 flights a year with Atlantic Airways. We have a corporate account worth $7 million annually, and you just had me removed from a plane because your staff didn't think I looked like I belonged in first class. Monica's mouth opened. No sound came out. DJ pulled out his phone and made a call. It rang once. Marcus, he said when the line connected, I need you to pull our Atlantic contract. All of it. Flights, cargo, partnerships. I want a full review by tomorrow morning. He listened for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I'll explain later. Just get it done. He hung up. Monica was shaking. Mr. Caldwell, please let me. I'm not interested in apologies. I'm interested in accountability. I'll have someone from corporate reach out. They already are. And that's when Monica's phone rang. She looked at the screen. Her hands trembled as she answered. This is Monica Dale. DJ couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but he saw Monica's face drain of color. She nodded,
murmured, "Yes, sir," 3 times, and then hung up. She looked at DJ like he'd just pulled a grenade pin. "That was the regional VP," she said quietly. "He's on his way." DJ crossed his arms. "Good."
The gate area had gone silent. Passengers from Flight 447 had started trickling back out, their departure delayed indefinitely. Some of them stared at DJ. Others filmed. A few approached Monica, demanding answers. She ignored them. Her focus was entirely on DJ now, her earlier confidence replaced by barely concealed panic. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I understand you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm done. If we could just step into a private office." "No." DJ's voice was firm. "Everything happens here. In public. On camera. Because the second we go behind closed doors, this becomes another quiet settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. And nothing changes." Monica's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and her face went even paler. "The stock," she whispered. DJ raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" "Atlantic stock. It's dropping." DJ pulled out his own phone and checked. Sure enough, Atlantic Airways' share price had dipped 2% in the last 20 minutes. It wasn't a crash, not yet. But the trend was clear. The live streams had gone viral. News outlets were picking up the story. Social media was exploding, and Wall Street was paying attention. Monica looked like she might be sick. "Mr. Caldwell, please, let me fix this." "You can't fix this, Monica. This isn't about me anymore. It's about every black passenger, every brown passenger, every person who's ever been told they don't belong because of how they look. You can't fix that with a free flight and an apology." "Then what do you want?" DJ met her eyes. "I want systemic change. I want every staff member involved in this incident terminated. I want mandatory bias training for your entire crew, with real accountability, not some online module people click through. I want an anonymous reporting hotline for passengers who experience discrimination, and I want it all made public."
Monica's mouth opened and closed. "I don't have the authority. Then get someone who does." Behind them, a man in an expensive suit was speed-walking toward the gate. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of polished appearance that screamed executive. Monica saw him and straightened, relief flooding her face. "Mr. Renwick," she said. "Thank God." Jonathan Renwick, Regional Vice President of Atlantic Airways, looked at DJ with the practiced calm of someone who'd spent years putting out fires. He extended his hand. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm so sorry for what happened. This is completely unacceptable." DJ didn't shake his hand. "Then let's talk about what you're going to do about it." Renwick lowered his hand. "Of course. Can we speak privately?" "No." Renwick blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I said no. Everything happens here, in front of everyone." Renwick glanced at the crowd of passengers, all of them filming, and the blood drained from his face. But to his credit, he didn't argue. He nodded slowly. "All right, what do you want?" DJ outlined his demands again: terminations, bias training, anonymous reporting, public transparency. Renwick listened without interrupting. When DJ finished, Renwick was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "If we do this, if we make this public, it could destroy us." DJ's expression didn't change. "You're already being destroyed. Right now, thousands of people are watching. The news is covering it. Your stock is falling. The crisis is already public. The only question is whether you control the narrative or let it control you." Renwick's jaw tightened. "And if I agree to your demands? Then you show the world that Atlantic Airways is willing to own its mistakes and do better. You turn a PR nightmare into a case study in corporate accountability. And maybe you earn back some trust." Renwick looked at Monica. She nodded. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Get me the CEO, now." The call lasted 15 minutes. Renwick put it on speaker, not because he wanted to, but because DJ insisted. The gate area had become a makeshift courtroom with passengers serving as jury and the internet as judge. The CEO of Atlantic Airways, a man named Gerald Kessler, had a voice like gravel. He didn't waste time on pleasantries.
Mr. Caldwell, he said, I've been briefed on the situation. I want you to know that what happened today does not represent the values of this company. With all due respect, Mr. Kessler, it represents exactly what your company values, because this isn't an isolated incident, it's a pattern, and until today, nobody did anything about it. Kessler was silent. DJ continued, You have a choice right now. You can bury this with a settlement and hope it goes away, or you can use this as an opportunity to make real change. What kind of change? DJ laid out his demands one more time. Kessler listened. When DJ finished, there was a long pause. Then Kessler said, If we agree to this, I need your word that you won't pursue legal action. DJ laughed, a cold, humorless sound. You want me to protect you from accountability? I want to resolve this. Then resolve it. Fire the people who discriminated against me. Implement the training. Create the hotline. Make it public. Do that, and I'll consider letting this end here. But if you try to bury this, if you try to spin this into some both sides narrative, I will take this to court, and I will win because I have everything on camera. Another silence. Then Kessler said, All right, we'll do it. Renwick exhaled. Monica looked like she might cry. DJ didn't smile. He just nodded. I'll be watching. The announcement came 3 hours later. Atlantic Airways issued a press release. Captain Grant Holloway, flight attendant Brielle Knox, and ground supervisor Monica Dale were terminated effective immediately. The airline committed to mandatory bias training for all employees to be completed within 90 days. An independent third-party hotline was established for passengers to report discrimination anonymously, and the entire incident, along with the company's response, was made public. The stock stabilized. Then it started to climb. Investors, it turned out, rewarded accountability. DJ boarded a flight to Chicago the next morning. Different crew, different plane, same first-class seat. When the flight attendant, a young man with kind eyes, scanned his boarding pass, he smiled and said, Welcome aboard, Mr. Caldwell. Can I get you anything? DJ shook his head. I'm good. Thank you. The flight was uneventful. No one asked him to move. No one questioned his ticket. No one treated him like he didn't belong. It was, DJ thought, the most ordinary flight of his life. And that was exactly the point. The Chicago skyline glittered through DJ's hotel window that night, a constellation of steel and glass that usually felt like home. But tonight, the city seemed different, sharper somehow, as if the world had tilted slightly on its axis and he was only now noticing the angle. He sat on the edge of the bed, his phone buzzing with notifications he couldn't bring himself to answer. Messages from investors, colleagues, old friends who'd seen the video. Everyone wanted to know the same thing, what happened next. DJ didn't have an answer, not yet. Because what he'd done at JFK wasn't just about one flight or one airline. It was about something bigger, something that had been building in him for years. Every time he'd been followed in a department store, every time a taxi had passed him by, every time someone had looked at him and seen a threat instead of a person. He'd swallowed it all, told himself it was the price of success, that fighting every battle would leave him exhausted and alone. But yesterday had been different. Yesterday, he'd had witnesses, cameras, proof. And now the question wasn't whether to fight, it was how far to take it. His phone rang. Not a text or an email, but an actual call. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach tighten. Marcus Chen, his chief operating officer and oldest friend, didn't call at midnight unless something was seriously wrong. Tell me, DJ said when he answered. Marcus's voice was tight. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where Atlantic's CEO just issued a counterstatement. They're walking back everything. DJ stood up so fast the room spun. What do you mean, walking back? I mean, they fired Holloway and Knox like they promised, but they're calling it personnel restructuring. Monica Dale got reassigned to a desk job with full benefits. The bias training got downgraded to a cultural awareness seminar. And the hotline? It's run by their internal HR department, not a third party. That's not what we agreed to. I know, but Kessler's spinning it as going above and beyond industry standards and hoping nobody reads the fine print. DJ closed his eyes. Of course.
This was how it always worked. Big promises in the moment of crisis, then a slow erosion of accountability once the cameras stopped rolling. By next month, the whole thing would be memory hold, a footnote in some corporate diversity report that nobody read. Send me everything, DJ said. The statements, the details, all of it. Already in your inbox. DJ, listen, they're betting you'll let this go. They think you got what you wanted and you'll move on. Then they don't know me very well. That's what I figured. So what's the play? DJ looked out at the city again, at all those windows hiding all those lives. How many of them had their own stories? How many had been told they didn't belong, that they were too much or not enough, that the rules were different for people like them? I'm not letting this go, he said quietly. If Atlantic thinks they can half-ass this and hope it blows over, they're about to learn otherwise. You want me to pull the contract? Not yet. First, I want to see how deep this goes. Marcus was silent for a moment. You're going to dig, aren't you? I'm going to shine a light, and we're going to see what crawls out. The next morning, DJ didn't go to his office. Instead, he drove to a coffee shop in Bronzeville, a neighborhood where the walls remembered jazz and the street still carried the weight of the Great Migration. He ordered black coffee and sat in the back corner, waiting. Dr. Elaine Mercer arrived 15 minutes later. She spotted him immediately and crossed the room with the same confidence she'd shown on Flight 447. When she sat down, she studied him for a long moment. You're making waves, she said. I'm trying to make change. There's a difference? DJ smiled slightly. Usually about $10 million and a good lawyer. Elaine laughed, a real laugh, warm and unguarded. I like you, Darius Caldwell. You've got spine. I appreciate you speaking up. Most people wouldn't have. Most people are cowards. She said it matter-of-factly, without heat. I've been a physician for 23 years. I've seen what happens when good people stay silent. It kills patients. It ruins lives. So when I see something wrong, I say something. Even when it's not your fight? Especially then. Because injustice isn't just your problem or my problem. It's our problem. And if we don't stand up for each other, we're all just waiting for our turn to be somebody's victim. DJ leaned back in his chair. I want to hire you. Elaine raised an eyebrow. As a doctor? As a consultant. I'm about to go to war with Atlantic Airways, and I need people who understand systemic discrimination, not just as theory, but as lived experience. People who can help me build something that actually works. You're serious? Dead serious. Atlantic thinks they can slap a Band-Aid on this and call it progress. I want to prove them wrong, but I can't do it alone. Elaine studied him again, and DJ had the sense he was being evaluated the way she might evaluate a patient, checking for vitals, looking for signs of stability or collapse. All right, she said finally. I'm in, but I have conditions. Name them. 1. We don't settle for symbolic victories. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. 2. You don't make this about revenge. This is about fixing a broken system, not punishing individuals. 3. When this gets hard, and it will get hard, you don't quit. DJ extended his hand. Deal. They shook. Over the next 2 weeks, DJ built a team. Dr. Mercer brought in contacts from her network, civil rights attorneys, diversity consultants, former airline employees who'd witnessed discrimination firsthand. Marcus pulled financial records showing patterns in Atlantic's complaint resolution. Black passengers were 5 times more likely to be removed from flights than white passengers, and complaints of racial discrimination were dismissed 83% of the time without investigation. But the real breakthrough came from a woman named Shauna Briggs. She was 26, a graduate student in sociology at Northwestern, and she'd been collecting stories. For the past 3 years, she'd run a website called Voices in Transit, where passengers could anonymously share their experiences with discrimination in the airline industry. The site had thousands of entries, some minor, some devastating. Stories of mothers separated from children because gate agents didn't believe they were related. Stories of passengers in hijabs subjected to extra screenings while white travelers breezed through. Stories of people told to go back where they came from at 30,000 feet with nowhere to escape. Shauna showed up to DJ's office unannounced, carrying a laptop and a manila folder thick with printed pages. She was small, barely 5 feet tall,
with box braids pulled into a high ponytail and eyes that burned with quiet fury. "You made them fire 3 people," she said without preamble. "That's more than anyone else has managed, but it's not enough." DJ gestured to a chair. "I'm listening." Shauna sat down and opened her laptop. Atlantic Airways has been settling discrimination complaints quietly for years. Small payouts, non-disclosure agreements, no admission of wrongdoing. I've documented 47 cases in the last 5 years alone. And those are just the ones people were willing to talk about. She pulled up a spreadsheet. Names, dates, flight numbers, settlements. DJ felt his jaw tighten as he scanned the list. "How did you get this?" he asked. "I have sources, people who work in HR, legal departments, gate management, people who are tired of watching this happen and not being able to stop it." "Why are you showing me?" Shauna met his eyes. "Because you have something I don't. Power. Money. A platform. You can do something with this information. I can't." DJ leaned forward. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to expose them. Not just Atlantic, the whole industry. I want every airline that's been burying complaints, paying people off, protecting racist employees to be held accountable. And I want the people who've been silenced to have their voices heard." "That's a big ask." "You started something at JFK. Don't let it end there." DJ looked at the spreadsheet again. 47 cases. 47 people who'd been told to shut up and go away. 47 stories that deserved to be told. "All right," he said. "Let's do it." They called it the Transit Justice Project. The plan was simple in theory, complex in execution. Collect testimonies from passengers who'd experienced discrimination, verify their stories, and release them in a coordinated campaign that would force the airline industry to respond. But it wasn't just about shame. DJ wanted concrete demands: industry-wide bias training standards, independent oversight of discrimination complaints, and financial penalties for airlines that failed to comply. The first challenge was trust. Many of the people Shauna had interviewed were terrified of retaliation. They'd signed NDAs. They'd been threatened with lawsuits. They'd watched others get blacklisted from airlines, stranded in legal battles, or dismissed as troublemakers. So DJ did something he rarely did. He made himself vulnerable. He recorded a video, just him, sitting in his office, no script or teleprompter. He talked about what had happened on Flight 447, about the fear he'd felt, even as a wealthy CEO, that saying the wrong thing might get him arrested, or worse, about the privilege of having resources to fight back and the responsibility that came with it. "I can't undo what happened to you," he said, looking directly into the camera. "But I can promise you this. If you share your story with me, I will make sure it's heard. I will protect you, and I will use every resource I have to make sure this never happens to anyone else." The video went viral within hours. By the end of the week, the Transit Justice Project had received over 300 submissions. Shauna and her team worked around the clock to verify each story, cross-referencing flight records, interviewing witnesses, pulling court documents from sealed settlements. Dr. Mercer helped identify patterns, not just racial discrimination, but discrimination against disabled passengers, LGBTQ+ travelers, non-English speakers. And Marcus worked the numbers. He calculated the financial cost of discrimination, lost revenue from boycotts, legal fees, stock devaluations. He built a case that accountability wasn't just morally right, it was economically smart. But Atlantic wasn't sitting still. The counteroffensive came on a Tuesday morning. DJ was in a strategy meeting with his team when his phone lit up with alerts. Atlantic Airways had issued a press release accusing him of weaponizing a personal grievance to damage the airline industry. They claimed he was exploiting his position as a stakeholder to settle scores, and that his so-called advocacy was really just corporate sabotage. The statement was carefully crafted. It acknowledged isolated incidents but framed them as exceptions, not the rule. It praised Atlantic's diversity initiatives and pointed to the terminations of Holloway and Knox as proof of the company's commitment to accountability, and it included a veiled threat. Mr. Caldwell's actions may constitute a breach of his fiduciary duties as a corporate stakeholder, and we are exploring all legal remedies. DJ read it twice, then set his phone down. "They're threatening to sue you," Marcus said. I know. They're also framing you as the bad guy, making it look like this is personal. It is personal. It's personal to everyone who's ever been discriminated against. Elaine leaned forward. Darius, they're trying to isolate you, make you look like a rogue actor instead of someone leading a movement. If they can convince the public that this is just a vendetta, they win. DJ stood up and walked to the window. The city stretched out below him, indifferent to his crisis. Somewhere out there, people were boarding planes, hoping not to be humiliated, hoping not to be told they didn't belong. Then we don't let them control the narrative, he said. We release the stories, all of them. And we make it clear that this isn't about me. It's about them. Shauna looked up from her laptop. We're not ready. We still have 50 testimonies to verify. How long will that take? 2 weeks, maybe 3. We don't have 3 weeks. Atlantic's trying to bury this before it gets worse. If we wait, they'll have time to spin the story, pay off witnesses, bury evidence. We need to move now. With unverified stories? That's irresponsible. If even one of them turns out to be false, it discredits everything. DJ turned to face her. Then we verify the ones we have. How many testimonies are rock solid? Shauna scrolled through her files. 112. Flight records, corroborating witnesses, documentation. They're airtight. That's enough. Darius, it has to be enough. Because if we don't act now, those 112 people stay silent, and Atlantic keeps getting away with it. The room went quiet. Then Elaine spoke. He's right. We can't let perfect be the enemy of good. We release what we have. We make it clear that this is just the beginning, and we invite others to come forward. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll get the legal team ready. If Atlantic tries to sue, we'll be prepared. Shauna looked at DJ for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, let's do it. What? They released the testimonies on a Thursday at noon. Not through a press release or a news conference, but through a dedicated website, transitjustice.org. 112 stories organized by airline, date, and type of discrimination. Each one included documentation, boarding passes, complaint forms, settlement agreements with redacted signatures to protect the victims. The homepage featured DJ's video, along with a simple message. These are not isolated incidents. This is a pattern, and it needs to stop. Within an hour, the site had 1 million visitors. Within 3 hours, it crashed from the traffic. Shauna's team scrambled to upgrade the servers while DJ watched the social media feeds explode. News outlets picked up the story immediately. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, everyone wanted interviews. Activists and celebrities shared the link. Politicians started calling for congressional hearings, and Atlantic Airways stock began to fall. Not a gentle dip this time, but a free fall. By the closing bell, they'd lost 9% of their market value. Other airlines followed. United down 6%, Delta down 4%, American down 5%. Wall Street had spoken, and it wasn't happy. But neither was Atlantic. The lawsuit arrived the next morning. Atlantic Airways versus Darius J. Caldwell filed in federal court seeking $50 million in damages for defamation, breach of fiduciary duty, and tortious interference with business relationships. The complaint was 83 pages long and accused DJ of everything from fraud to conspiracy. Marcus dropped the document on DJ's desk with a grim expression. They're not playing around. DJ skimmed the first few pages. They're scared. This is a desperation move. Desperation or not, it's a real threat. If they win, they could bankrupt you. They won't win. You sound confident. I am. Because every word on that website is true. They can sue me all they want, but truth is an absolute defense against defamation. And as for the rest of it, breach of duty, interference, that's just noise. They're hoping to intimidate me into backing down. And if they succeed, DJ looked up at him, then I lose $50 million. But those 112 people still get their stories told. And the next person who gets discriminated against knows they're not alone. That's worth more than money. Marcus sat down, rubbing his face. You know what scares me? That you actually mean that. I do. Then I hope you're ready, because this is about to get ugly. 10. It got ugly fast. Atlantic's legal team went scorched earth. They filed motions to freeze DJ's assets, claiming he was using his wealth to fund a campaign of harassment. They subpoenaed every document related to the Transit Justice Project, hoping to find something, anything, they could use against him. They even hired a PR firm to dig into DJ's past, looking for scandals or controversies that might discredit him. They found nothing. DJ had built his company on integrity, and his record was clean, but that didn't stop them from trying to manufacture doubt. Suddenly, stories started appearing in the media, anonymous sources claiming DJ was difficult to work with, that he had a chip on his shoulder, that his advocacy was really just a cover for personal ambition. The implication was clear: don't trust the angry black man. He's got an agenda. DJ ignored it. He'd been called worse. What he couldn't ignore was the toll it was taking on his team. Shauna started getting death threats. Elaine's medical practice was flooded with one-star reviews from fake accounts. Marcus's kids were harassed at school by parents who worked for Atlantic or owned stock in the company. "This is what they do," DJ told them during an emergency meeting. "They can't win on the facts, so they attack the people. They want us to give up, to decide it's not worth it." "Maybe it's not," Shauna said quietly. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "Maybe we've done enough. We got the stories out. We started the conversation. Do we really need to keep pushing?" "Yes," DJ said firmly. "Because if we stop now, they win. Not just the lawsuit, but the whole fight. They get to say, 'See? We told you they were troublemakers. We told you this was all fake.' And the next time someone speaks up, people will remember that we quit. They'll remember that we couldn't handle the pressure." "I'm not sure I can handle it," Shauna admitted. "Every day I wake up to messages telling me I should die. People doxing me, threatening my family. For what? So some airline executive doesn't have to do bias training." DJ walked over and knelt beside her chair. "For more than that. For every kid who's told they don't belong. For every parent who's separated from their child because someone doesn't believe their family. For every person who's been made to feel less than human because of how they look. That's what we're fighting for. And I know it's hard. I know it hurts, but we can't stop now." Shauna wiped her eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are," Elaine said, her voice gentle but firm. "You've been strong this whole time, and you're not alone. We're all in this together." Marcus nodded. "And when it gets too hard, we lean on each other. That's how we survive." Shauna took a shaky breath, then she nodded. "Okay, I'm still in." DJ squeezed her shoulder. "Thank you." The turning point came from an unexpected source. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal, a woman named Linda Hartwell, had been quietly investigating Atlantic Airways for months. She'd seen the Transit Justice Project and recognized it as the missing piece of her story. She reached out to DJ and asked for an interview. They met in a downtown restaurant, Neutral Ground. Linda was in her 50s with sharp eyes and a notebook filled with meticulous handwriting. She didn't waste time on small talk. "I've been covering Atlantic for 3 years," she said. "They're a mess. Toxic culture, financial irregularities, labor violations. But every time I get close to publishing something substantial, they threaten legal action or buy off my sources." "So why are you still digging?" "Because someone has to. And now, thanks to you, I have a way in." She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "I've been sitting on this for 2 months. I couldn't verify it until your website went live." DJ opened the folder. Inside were financial documents showing that Atlantic had paid out over $18 million in discrimination settlements over the past decade, all hidden in operational expenses and customer relations budgets. "They've been burying complaints for years," Linda continued. "Not just racial discrimination, but sexual harassment, disability discrimination, retaliation against whistleblowers. Your 112 stories? That's just the tip of the iceberg." DJ felt his pulse quicken. "Can you prove this?" "I have the documents. Bank records, internal memos, emails, everything. But I need your help to get the rest." "What do you need?" "Access to your sources. The people who submitted testimonies. If even a handful of them can connect their stories to specific settlements, I can blow this wide open." DJ leaned back, thinking. Exposing his sources meant putting them at risk, but it also meant giving them the chance to be heard on a national stage. "I'll talk to them," he said, "but it's their choice. I won't force anyone to come forward. Linda nodded. Fair enough. In the end, 23 people agreed to be interviewed. Their stories ranged from humiliating to harrowing. There was Kevin Tran, a Vietnamese-American engineer who'd been accused of smuggling after TSA agents randomly selected him for screening on 6 consecutive flights. There was Amara Johnson, a black woman who'd been separated from her infant daughter because a flight attendant didn't believe they were related, despite Amara showing ID and a birth certificate. There was Marcus, not DJ's Marcus, but another Marcus, a gay man who'd been told he couldn't sit next to his husband because it made other passengers uncomfortable. Linda interviewed each of them with meticulous care, cross-referencing their accounts with Atlantic's internal records. And when her story finally ran, a 10,000-word expose titled Atlantic Airways' Hidden Cost, How One Airline Paid Millions to Cover Up Discrimination, it changed everything. The article went viral immediately. Senators demanded investigations. The Department of Transportation announced a formal review. And Atlantic's stock, which had been recovering slightly, plummeted again. But more importantly, people started listening, not just to DJ's story or Linda's reporting, but to all the voices that had been silenced for so long. Other airlines began implementing reforms, terrified they'd be next. Industry groups announced new standards, and passengers, regular people who'd never thought much about discrimination, started paying attention. The tide was turning, and Atlantic Airways was drowning. Gerald Kessler's office occupied the entire top floor of Atlantic Airways' corporate headquarters in Dallas, a glass tower that reflected the Texas sun like a mirror. From his desk, he could see the runway at Love Field, watch planes take off and land in orderly succession, each departure and arrival a testament to the machine he'd built over 30 years. But today, the view brought him no comfort. Today, he was watching his empire crack. The Wall Street Journal article had been published at 6 in the morning. By noon, Atlantic's board had called an emergency meeting. By 2 o'clock, 3 major institutional investors had issued statements expressing serious concerns about the company's governance. By 4, the stock had lost another 14%. Kessler sat at the head of a mahogany conference table, surrounded by attorneys, PR consultants, and board members whose expressions ranged from fury to terror. His general counsel, Patricia Ramos, was mid-presentation, clicking through slides that showed the legal exposure in stark numbers. $18 million in settlements over 10 years, she said, her voice clipped and professional. That's documented. What we don't know is how many additional cases might come forward now that the floodgates are open. Conservative estimate? $50 million in additional liability. Worst case? North of $200 million. A board member named Douglas Penfield, a silver-haired venture capitalist who'd been on the board since the 90s, slammed his hand on the table. How the hell did this happen? How did we not know we were sitting on a discrimination time bomb? Kessler kept his voice level. We knew there were complaints. Every airline has complaints. We handled them according to standard protocols. Standard protocols? Penfield's face was red. You paid people to shut up and called it customer relations? That's not protocol, Gerald. That's a cover-up. We were protecting the company. You were protecting yourself. And now we're all going to pay for it. Patricia cleared her throat. Gentlemen, we need to focus on damage control. The lawsuit against Caldwell isn't holding up. His attorneys filed a motion to dismiss yesterday, and frankly, they have a strong case. Truth is an absolute defense, and everything on his website is documented. If we continue with the lawsuit, we're just generating more bad press. So we drop it, another board member asked, a woman named Chen, whose family owned a logistics empire in Singapore. We just let him destroy us? He's not destroying us, Patricia said carefully. We're destroying ourselves. He's just holding up a mirror. The room fell silent. Kessler could feel the weight of their stares, the judgment in their eyes. 30 years he'd given this company. He'd taken Atlantic from a regional carrier to a national powerhouse. He'd survived recessions, terrorist attacks, fuel crises, a pandemic, and now some CEO with a cell phone and a grudge was going to take him down? I want options, he said quietly. Patricia exchanged a glance with the head of PR, a slick operative named Trevor Walsh who'd been brought in from a crisis management firm. Trevor leaned forward, tapping his tablet. Option 1. We settle with Caldwell, quietly. Offer him whatever it takes to make this go away. He won't settle, Kessler said. He's already turned down 2 offers. Then we sweeten the pot. 50 million, 100, whatever it takes. You're assuming he wants money. What if he wants blood? Trevor's smile was thin. Everyone wants something, Gerald. We just need to figure out what. Option 2, Chen asked. We go full transparency. Fire everyone involved in the settlements, implement every reform Caldwell demanded, and frame it as a company-wide transformation. We take the hit now, rebuild trust over the next year, and hope investors see it as a long-term play. Penfield shook his head. That's career suicide for everyone in this room. You're talking about admitting to systematic discrimination. The lawsuits alone would bury us. The lawsuits are coming anyway, Patricia said. At least this way, we control the narrative. Option 3, Kessler asked. Trevor's expression went cold. We go after Caldwell personally, not through the courts. That ship has sailed, but there are other ways. We dig into his business, his finances, his personal life. Find something we can use to discredit him. Make this about him instead of us. The room went very still. Chen looked horrified. Penfield looked intrigued. Patricia looked like she wanted to throw Trevor out the window. That's illegal, she said flatly. And immoral. It's survival, Trevor shot back. You want to play nice while he burns down your company? Fine. But don't come crying to me when Atlantic becomes a cautionary tale in business school textbooks. Kessler rubbed his temples. A headache was building behind his eyes, the kind that came when there were no good choices left, only different shades of disaster. He thought about his wife, Barbara, waiting at home in their Highland Park mansion, their daughter, who just started law school, his grandchildren, who thought he was a hero. What would they think when they read about the settlements? About the black passengers removed from planes, the Muslim families subjected to extra screenings, the disabled travelers denied accommodations? Would they understand that he hadn't known the full extent? That middle management had handled complaints, that HR had managed settlements, that he'd been insulated from the ugliest details by layers of bureaucracy? Or would they just see what everyone else saw? A man who'd built an empire on the backs of people who couldn't fight back. I need to talk to Caldwell, he said. Patricia blinked. What? Face to face, no lawyers, no press, just him and me. That's a terrible idea, Trevor said. You give him the chance to record you, twist your words. I don't care. Set it up. Gerald, set it up. DJ received the request that evening. He was in his kitchen, reheating Chinese takeout and scrolling through the latest news coverage when his phone buzzed with an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "A conversation." The message was brief. Gerald Kessler wanted to meet. No lawyers, no conditions, just a conversation between 2 men who found themselves on opposite sides of a national crisis. The proposed location was neutral ground, a private room at the University Club in Chicago, a place where executives and academics met to discuss ideas over whiskey and handshakes. DJ read it twice, then forwarded it to Marcus. 3 minutes later, his phone rang. Are you seriously considering this? Marcus asked. I'm curious. Curious? Darius, the man is trying to save his company by destroying yours. This is a trap. Maybe. Or maybe he's genuinely trying to find a way forward. And if it's a trap? DJ smiled slightly. Then we spring it, together. Marcus sighed. You're going to do this no matter what I say, aren't you? Probably. Fine. But I'm coming with you, and we're recording everything. Deal. They met on a Wednesday evening. The University Club was all dark wood and leather chairs, the kind of place where power was traded in whispers and deals were sealed with eye contact. DJ and Marcus arrived first, accompanied by Patricia Ramos, who'd insisted on being present to ensure nothing Kessler said could be used against the company later. She was professional and cautious, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. Kessler arrived alone. He looked older than his photographs, his face lined with exhaustion and something that might have been regret. When he saw DJ, he extended his hand. Mr. Caldwell, thank you for agreeing to meet. DJ shook his hand. The grip was firm, but not aggressive. Mr. Kessler. They sat down in a private room overlooking the Chicago skyline. A waiter brought water and coffee, then disappeared. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Kessler broke the silence. I've been CEO of Atlantic Airways for 12 years. Before that, I was COO for 8. I've spent my entire adult life in this industry, and I want you to know that what happened to you on Flight 447 is not who we are. DJ didn't respond immediately. He studied Kessler, looking for signs of calculation or manipulation. What he saw instead was a man who'd been forced to confront an uncomfortable truth, that good intentions didn't matter if the system itself was rotten. With all due respect, Mr. Kessler, DJ said quietly, what happened to me is exactly who you are. It's not an aberration, it's a pattern, and it's been happening for years. Kessler's jaw tightened. I didn't know about the settlements, not the full scope. Middle management handled complaints, HR negotiated payouts, and I trusted them to do the right thing. But you didn't verify. You didn't ask questions. You let them bury problems because it was easier than fixing them. Yes. The admission seemed to cost him something. Yes, I did. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Gerald, it's true, Pat. Kessler looked at her, then back at DJ. I built a culture where problems got solved quietly, where customer satisfaction meant making complaints disappear. And I convinced myself that was good leadership, that I was protecting the company, protecting jobs, but I was really just protecting myself from having to face what we'd become. Marcus leaned forward. So what now? You came here to apologize, to offer another settlement we'll refuse? I came here to ask what it would take to make this right. DJ studied him. You can't make it right. You can only make it better. Then tell me how. You start by telling the truth, not some sanitized PR version, but the real truth. You admit that Atlantic Airways has systematically discriminated against passengers for at least a decade. You admit that you paid people to stay silent. You admit that you failed in your duty to protect the people who trusted you with their safety. Kessler went pale. If I do that, the company might not survive. The company doesn't deserve to survive. Not as it is. But the people who work for you, the pilots, the flight attendants, the gate agents who are just trying to do their jobs, they deserve better. The passengers who depend on you to get them home safely deserve better. So you have a choice. You can let Atlantic die quietly, strangled by lawsuits and bad press, or you can burn it down and rebuild something better from the ashes. You're asking me to commit corporate suicide. I'm asking you to choose integrity over self-preservation. And yeah, that might cost you everything, but it's the only way forward. The room fell silent again. Patricia was staring at Kessler like she'd never seen him before. Marcus watched DJ with something that looked like pride. Kessler stood up and walked to the window. The city sprawled below him. Millions of lives lived in those buildings. Millions of stories he'd never hear. How many of them had been hurt by his company? How many had been told they didn't belong, that they were less than, that their dignity didn't matter? I have a daughter, he said without turning around. She's 25, wants to be a civil rights attorney. When this all started, she called me, asked me if it was true, if we really treated people that way. He turned to face DJ, and there were tears in his eyes. I told her it was complicated, that she didn't understand how business worked, and she said, Dad, discrimination isn't complicated. It's just wrong. And then she hung up. She hasn't answered my calls since. DJ felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't the corporate villain he'd been fighting. This was just a man who'd made terrible choices and was finally being forced to confront them. What did you tell your wife? DJ asked. Kessler laughed bitterly. Barbara? She already knew. She tried to warn me years ago after she saw a complaint that got buried. Said we were building a house on sand. I didn't listen. It's not too late to listen now. Kessler returned to the table and sat down heavily. If I do what you're asking, if I tell the truth, implement real reforms, accept full accountability, I'll lose my job. The board will force me out. I might face criminal charges. Probably. And you think that's justice? DJ leaned back in his chair. I think justice is complicated. You're not the only person responsible for what happened, but you're the person at the top, the one who set the culture, who benefited the most from the system. So yeah, you should face consequences. But more importantly, you should use whatever time you have left to fix what you broke. And if I do? If I tell the truth? If I implement every reform you've demanded? If I step down and let someone else lead? Will that be enough for you? DJ thought about all the people who'd shared their stories. Kevin Tran, who still had panic attacks in airports. Amara Johnson, who couldn't look at a flight attendant without remembering the day her daughter was taken from her arms. Marcus, the other Marcus, who'd been told his love wasn't acceptable at 30,000 feet. It won't be enough, DJ said honestly. Nothing will ever be enough to undo the harm. But it's a start. And sometimes, a start is all we can hope for. The press conference was scheduled for Friday morning. In the 48 hours between the meeting and the announcement, Atlantic Airways leadership engaged in what could only be described as controlled chaos. Kessler drafted a statement that Patricia revised 17 times. The board held 3 emergency sessions, 2 of which ended with members storming out. The PR team prepared for every possible question, knowing they'd still be blindsided. And DJ watched from a distance, uncertain whether Kessler would actually follow through or cave to the pressure at the last minute. The night before the conference, he got a call from Dr. Elaine Mercer. "I've been thinking about something," she said without preamble. "When this is all over, when Atlantic implements reforms, when the other airlines follow suit, when the system actually changes, what happens to the people?" "What do you mean?" "I mean the passengers who were hurt, the employees who witnessed discrimination and stayed silent because they were afraid, the families who were torn apart. Systemic change is great, but it doesn't heal individual trauma. So what do we do about that?" DJ hadn't thought about it, not really. He'd been so focused on fighting the institutions that he'd forgotten about the people caught in the machinery. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "I think we need a healing component. Not just policy changes, but actual support. Therapy resources, community forums, a space where people can share their experiences and process what happened. Because justice without healing is just revenge in a prettier package." DJ thought about Shauna, still receiving death threats. About Kevin Tran, who'd said he might never fly again. About his own nightmares, the ones where he was stuck in that airplane aisle forever, phones recording his humiliation for eternity. "You're right," he said. "Can you put something together?" "I already started. I've been talking to therapists who specialize in racial trauma, advocates who work with marginalized communities, former airline employees who want to help. If Atlantic agrees to fund it as part of their accountability measures, we could have a support network up and running in a month." "Add it to the demands." "Already did. I sent Kessler's team a proposal this afternoon." DJ smiled. "You're terrifying, you know that?" "I'm necessary. There's a difference, but..." Bambat. Friday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of Chicago winter day where the cold bites. But the sky is so blue it hurts to look at. The press conference was held at Atlantic's corporate headquarters in Dallas, but it was broadcast live across every major network. Reporters packed the room, cameras multiplying like organisms, the air electric with anticipation. Gerald Kessler walked to the podium at exactly 10 o'clock. He looked smaller than he had 2 days ago, diminished somehow, as if the weight of what he was about to do had physically compressed him. Patricia Ramos stood to his left, her face a mask of professional composure. To his right stood 2 board members who'd voted to support transparency, Chen and a woman named Rodriguez, who'd been brought in specifically to oversee diversity initiatives. Kessler adjusted the microphone. The room fell silent. "Good morning," he said. His voice was steady, but not strong. "I'm here today to address the allegations that have been made against Atlantic Airways regarding systematic discrimination of passengers. I want to be clear from the outset. These are not just allegations, they're facts." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Over the past decade, Atlantic Airways paid out approximately $18 million to settle complaints of discrimination. These complaints involved passengers who were profiled, harassed, or denied service based on their race, religion, disability status, sexual orientation, or national origin. In the vast majority of these cases, we required victims to sign non-disclosure agreements. We buried the complaints in our financial reports, and we continued to employ staff members who engaged in discriminatory behavior,
often protecting them from accountability. He paused, took a breath. DJ, watching from his office in Chicago, felt his heart hammering.
I want to apologize to every person who was hurt by our failures. To Darius Caldwell, who was removed from Flight 447 for no reason other than bias. To Kevin Tran, Amara Johnson, and the many others whose stories have come to light. You deserved better. You deserved dignity. And we failed you. Another pause. Kessler's hands gripped the podium. But apologies are not enough. Today, I'm announcing the following actions, effective immediately. 1. Atlantic Airways is terminating all non-disclosure agreements related to discrimination complaints. Victims are free to share their stories without fear of legal retaliation. 2. We are implementing mandatory bias training for every employee, from gate agents to executives, with quarterly assessments and real consequences for failure to comply. 3. We are establishing an independent oversight board to review all discrimination complaints, with representatives from civil rights organizations and affected communities. 4. We are creating a victim support fund administered by third-party advocates to provide therapy, legal assistance, and community resources to anyone who was harmed by our practices. The room erupted. Questions flew like shrapnel. Kessler raised his hand. I'm not finished. 5. I am stepping down as CEO of Atlantic Airways effective at the end of this quarter. The board will conduct a national search for my replacement, with a mandate to prioritize candidates who have demonstrated commitment to equity and justice. And 6. I am personally donating $5 million to the Transit Justice Project to support their work in holding not just Atlantic, but the entire airline industry accountable. The noise was deafening now. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras zoomed in on Kessler's face, searching for cracks, for signs of insincerity. But DJ saw something different. He saw a man who'd finally stopped running from the truth. Patricia stepped to the microphone. We'll take questions now. The first reporter, a woman from CNN, didn't waste time. Mr. Kessler, critics are calling this a PR stunt. How do we know these reforms will actually be implemented? You don't, Kessler said bluntly. Not yet, but I'm putting my career, my reputation, and my personal finances on the line. If Atlantic fails to follow through, I'll be the first to call them out. And I've asked Darius Caldwell and his team to serve as independent auditors with full access to our operations and the authority to publicly report on our progress. Another reporter from the Wall Street Journal stood up. What about the other airlines? United, Delta, American. They've all faced similar complaints. Do you believe this is an industry-wide problem? I know it is, and I hope they're watching, because burying problems doesn't make them go away. It just makes them worse. A third reporter from Fox News leaned into his microphone. Mr. Kessler, do you believe you should face criminal charges for your role in covering up discrimination? The room went silent. Kessler looked at Patricia, who gave the smallest shake of her head. Then he looked back at the cameras. That's not for me to decide. If prosecutors believe there's grounds for charges, I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. I'm not asking for mercy. I'm asking for a chance to make things right. The press conference lasted 90 minutes. By the time it ended, Atlantic's stock had dropped another 8%. But then, unexpectedly, it began to climb. Investors, it seemed, valued transparency over denial. Within a week, the stock had recovered half its losses. But more importantly, the reforms started happening. Not slowly, not cosmetically, but actually. The Independent Oversight Board was formed with representatives from the NAACP, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, and 3 passengers who'd been victims of discrimination. The bias training rolled out with real teeth. Employees who failed were put on probation, and repeat failures meant termination. The Victim Support Fund opened with a staff of 12 therapists, 3 attorneys, and 2 community organizers. And other airlines watched. United announced similar reforms 2 weeks later. Delta followed 3 days after that. American, Southwest, JetBlue. One by one, they implemented policies, created oversight mechanisms, established accountability. It wasn't perfect. There were still complaints, still incidents, still work to be done. But the wall of silence had been broken. Passengers knew they could speak up. Employees knew they could report bias. and executives knew they'd be held accountable. DJ watched it all unfold from his office in Chicago, still processing what had happened. He'd started this fight on an airplane, angry and humiliated and determined not to let it go. And somehow, impossibly, he'd won. Not just for himself, but for everyone who'd been told they didn't belong. His phone rang. It was Shauna. "Have you seen the numbers?" she asked, her voice tight with emotion. "What numbers?" "Transit justice. We've received over 1,500 new testimonies in the past week. Not just airlines, hotels, restaurants, retail stores, banks. People are coming forward everywhere." DJ felt something shift in his chest. "What are they asking for?" "The same thing you fought for. Accountability, transparency, change. They want to know that someone's listening, that their stories matter." "Then we listen, and we help them fight." Shauna was quiet for a moment. "This is bigger than Atlantic, isn't it?" "It always was. We just needed to prove it was possible." 3 months after Kessler's press conference, DJ found himself in a place he'd never expected to be, testifying before a Senate subcommittee on consumer protection. The hearing room was cavernous and intimidating, with marble columns that seemed to stretch toward heaven and mahogany benches arranged in ascending tiers like an amphitheater. Senators sat above him, their faces a mixture of curiosity and calculation, while behind him the gallery was packed with reporters, advocates, and airline executives who'd been summoned to account for their own practices. Senator Margaret Voss, a Democrat from Oregon who chaired the subcommittee, adjusted her reading glasses and peered down at DJ. She was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that came from decades of political combat. "Mr. Caldwell," she began, her voice carrying through the chamber with practiced authority. "You've become something of a national figure in the past few months. Some call you a hero. Others call you a troublemaker. How do you see yourself?" DJ considered the question carefully. He was wearing a suit today, Tom Ford, perfectly tailored, because Marcus had insisted that Congress required a certain level of formality. But he'd refused the tie, leaving his collar open, a small rebellion against the performance of respectability. "I see myself as someone who got tired of being told to sit down and shut up," he said. "I'm not special. I just had the resources to fight back when most people don't." Voss nodded. "Let's talk about those resources. You're the CEO of a multi-million-dollar logistics company. You have lawyers, publicists, connections. The average passenger who experiences discrimination doesn't have any of that. How do we protect them?" "That's why I'm here, Senator. We need federal regulations that require airlines to report discrimination complaints publicly, not bury them in settlements. We need independent oversight boards with real enforcement power. And we need to make it financially devastating for companies to discriminate. Not just a cost of doing business, but an existential threat to their bottom line." Senator James Hartley, a Republican from Texas, leaned into his microphone. He was younger than Voss, barely 50, with the kind of telegenic polish that suggested presidential ambitions. "Mr. Caldwell, I appreciate your passion, but aren't you essentially asking the federal government to micromanage private businesses? Don't companies have the right to handle internal complaints as they see fit?" DJ met his eyes. "With all due respect, Senator, discrimination isn't an internal complaint. It's a civil rights violation. And when companies consistently fail to police themselves, government has an obligation to step in. That's not micromanagement. That's accountability." Hartley's smile was thin. "Some of my constituents might call it government overreach. Some of my constituents call it survival. When you're black or brown or Muslim or disabled or gay, you don't have the luxury of assuming companies will do the right thing. You need someone with the power to make sure they do." The gallery murmured. Voss gavelled for order, but DJ could see the ghost of a smile on her face. The hearing lasted 4 hours. DJ answered questions about Atlantic's reforms, about the Transit Justice Project, about the economic impact of discrimination on consumer confidence. He was joined by Dr. Mercer, who testified about the psychological toll of racial profiling, and by Shauna, who presented data showing that complaints had increased by 400% since the website launched. Not because discrimination was getting worse, but because people finally believed someone was listening. But the most powerful testimony came from the passengers themselves. Kevin Tron spoke about the panic attacks that still gripped him whenever he entered an airport. Amara Johnson described the nightmares where she heard her daughter crying and couldn't reach her. A man named Daniel Reeves, who used a wheelchair, explained how he'd been forced to crawl off a plane when the airline refused to provide proper assistance, his dignity stripped away while other passengers recorded on their phones. By the time Daniel finished speaking, half the gallery was in tears. Even Hartley looked shaken. Senator Voss called a brief recess. DJ stepped out into the hallway, suddenly desperate for air. He found a bench near a window overlooking the National Mall and sat down, his hands shaking slightly. Marcus appeared beside him with a bottle of water. "You did good in there." "I'm not sure it matters. These hearings happen all the time, and nothing changes." "This one's different. You made it different." DJ took the water and drank deeply. "I keep thinking about all the people we didn't reach. The ones who don't have social media, who don't speak English fluently, who are too scared to come forward. We're helping some people, but how many are we missing?" "You can't save everyone, DJ." "Why not?" Marcus sat down beside him. "Because you're human. Because even with all your resources and platform and righteous anger, there are limits to what one person can do. You've started something incredible, but you can't carry it alone forever. Then who carries it when I can't anymore? The people you've empowered, the organizations you've partnered with, the systems you're helping to build. That's how movements work. They start with one person's courage, but they survive through collective action." DJ looked out at the mall, at the monuments to dead presidents and past struggles. He wondered if any of them had felt this weight, this responsibility that was both burden and privilege. "I got a call from Kessler last week," he said quietly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? What did he want?" "To thank me." "Can you believe that? The man I destroyed, calling to say thank you." "What did you say?" I asked him why, and he said that before this happened, he'd stopped being able to look at himself in the mirror, that he'd known something was wrong but convinced himself it wasn't his problem to fix. And now, even though he's unemployed and probably facing lawsuits for the rest of his life, at least he can sleep at night. "Do you believe him?" DJ thought about the tears in Kessler's eyes at the university club, about the way his voice had cracked during the press conference, about the reports from Atlantic employees who said their former CEO visited the Victim Support Center twice a week, volunteering to listen to stories, to apologize personally to anyone who wanted to hear it. "Yeah," DJ said. "I do. I think he's genuinely trying to atone." "That doesn't undo the harm." "No, but it's more than most people in his position would do." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what scares me? That you're starting to see the humanity in everyone, even the people who hurt you. Is that a bad thing? It is if it makes you soft, if it makes you willing to accept half measures and broken promises because you feel sorry for the people you're fighting against." DJ turned to look at him. "You think I'm going soft? I think you're exhausted, and I think exhausted people make compromises they regret later. What would you have me do? Keep fighting until I collapse? Until I become so consumed by anger that I can't see anything else? I'd have you remember why you started this, not for Kessler's redemption or Atlantic's rehabilitation, but for all the people who are still being discriminated against right now, today, while we sit here having philosophical debates." The words stung because they were true. DJ had gotten so caught up in the machinery of change, the hearings, the press conferences, the negotiations, that he'd almost forgotten the faces, the real people whose lives hung in the balance while institutions moved at glacial speed. "You're right," he said. "Thank you. That's what I'm here for, to keep you honest." They returned to the hearing room for the afternoon session, where airline CEOs took their turn in the hot seat. The executives from United, Delta, and American all gave carefully rehearsed statements about their commitment to diversity and inclusion. They cited statistics, outlined training programs, praised their employees. They were polished and professional and completely full of shit. Senator Voss saw through it immediately. "Mr. Morrison," she said to United's CEO, a man named Richard Morrison who had the look of someone who'd never been told no in his entire life. "Your airline has paid out $6 million in discrimination settlements over the past 5 years. Why should we believe your reforms are anything more than window dressing?" Morrison shifted in his seat. "Senator, every one of those settlements was handled appropriately in accordance with our policies. Your policies allowed discrimination to flourish. That's the point. So I'll ask again, what's different now? We've implemented comprehensive training that's optional for senior management, according to documents my staff reviewed, training that employees can complete online in 20 minutes. Mr. Morrison, do you really expect us to believe that a 20-minute online course will eliminate decades of institutional bias? Morrison's face flushed. We're doing everything industry standards require. Industry standards are the problem. Voss's voice cracked like a whip. The industry has been regulating itself for decades, and look where that got us. 18 million in settlements at Atlantic alone, 6 million at United, 4 at Delta, 3 at American. You've created a system where discrimination is just another line item in the budget, and you're asking us to trust you to fix it? The room erupted in applause. The gallery, packed with victims and advocates, had finally heard someone in power say what they'd been screaming into the void for years. Voss gavelled for order, but she let the applause continue for a few extra seconds. DJ suspected she knew exactly what she was doing, creating a moment that would play on the evening news, that would pressure her colleagues to act. When the room finally quieted, Hartley cleared his throat. Madam Chair, while I appreciate the passion, I think we need to be careful about painting an entire industry as villains. Airlines employ hundreds of thousands of people. They connect our country, our world. Yes, there have been problems, but we can't destroy an entire sector because of the actions of a few bad actors. A few bad actors? Shauna's voice rang out from the witness table. She hadn't been called to speak again, but she stood anyway, ignoring the rules of Senate decorum. Senator, we've documented over 1,500 cases of discrimination across 6 major airlines in just the past 3 months. That's not a few bad actors. That's a systemic crisis. Security moved toward her, but Voss waved them off. Let her speak. Shauna's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. Every day, I get messages from people who've been hurt. A woman who was told she couldn't breastfeed her baby on a plane because it made other passengers uncomfortable. A man who was denied his medication because the flight attendant thought he was a drug addict. A family speaking Spanish who were accused of being human traffickers and detained for 6 hours. These aren't isolated incidents. This is who airlines are when nobody's watching. And if we don't fix this, if we let them get away with empty promises and 20-minute training courses, then we're complicit in every future violation. The room was silent. Even Hartley seemed at a loss for words. Voss looked at the airline CEOs. Gentlemen, you've heard the testimony. You've seen the evidence. You have a choice to make. You can fight this, spend millions on lawyers and lobbyists trying to water down any regulations we pass. Or you can work with us to create real, enforceable standards that protect passengers and restore trust in your industry. What's it going to be? Morrison exchanged glances with his fellow CEOs. DJ could almost see the calculations happening, the risk assessments, the political maneuvering. These were men who'd spent their careers managing quarterly earnings and shareholder expectations, not grappling with moral imperatives. Finally, Morrison spoke. Senator, we'd like to request a recess to consult with our legal teams. Request denied. I want an answer now. That's not reasonable. Neither is forcing black passengers to the back of the plane. Neither is separating mothers from their children. Neither is making disabled passengers crawl like animals. You want to talk about reasonable? Let's start by treating human beings with basic dignity. Morrison's jaw worked. DJ could see the fury in his eyes, the indignation of a powerful man being called to account. But he could also see something else. Fear. Because the world was watching, and the wrong answer would haunt him forever. We'll work with you, Morrison said finally. We'll support federal oversight. We'll implement third-party accountability measures. We'll do what's necessary. Get it in writing, Voss said, and have it on my desk by Monday. This hearing is adjourned. Quote. The celebration happened that night at a bar near Capitol Hill, a dive with sticky floors and cheap beer that felt more honest than the marble corridors they'd left behind. DJ bought the first round for everyone, his team, the passengers who'd testified, the advocates who'd been fighting this battle long before he arrived. They toasted to victory, to justice, to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, things could actually change. But DJ couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that the real work was still ahead. Dr. Mercer must have sensed his mood because she pulled him aside, away from the noise and celebration. "You look like someone who just won a battle, but knows he's still at war," she said.
Is it that obvious?
"Only to people who've been there." She sipped her whiskey, studying him. "Can I give you some advice? Please. Don't let this consume you. I've seen too many activists burn out, sacrifice everything for the cause, until there's nothing left of them. You've done something extraordinary, but you're also human. You need rest, you need joy. You need to remember who you are outside of this fight. I don't know if I can separate the two anymore. This fight is who I am." "No, it's what you're doing. There's a difference. Darius Caldwell exists independent of the Transit Justice Project. And if you forget that, if you merge your identity completely with your activism, you'll lose yourself." DJ thought about the past 3 months. The late nights, the constant travel, the weight of other people's trauma pressing down on him every single day. He thought about his apartment in Chicago, which he'd barely seen, the friends he'd stopped calling back, the hobbies he'd abandoned. "I don't know how to stop," he admitted. "Then don't stop. Just pause. Take a breath. Remember that you can't pour from an empty cup. Shauna needs me. Kevin, Amara, all the people still coming forward, they need me. They need the Transit Justice Project. They need the systems you're building. But they don't need you to destroy yourself in the process. In fact, if you burn out, you're useless to them. So taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's strategic." DJ drained his beer, let the bitter taste ground him. "When did you get so wise?" 23 years of emergency medicine. You learn to triage not just patients, but yourself. Otherwise, you don't last. They returned to the celebration, and DJ forced himself to be present, to laugh at Marcus's terrible jokes, to listen to Shauna's plans for expanding the website, to accept congratulations from strangers who kept saying he'd changed their lives. But later, alone in his hotel room, he pulled out his phone and looked at the messages he'd been ignoring. An email from his mother, worried because she hadn't heard from him in weeks. A text from his college roommate asking if he was okay. An invitation to his niece's birthday party that he'd already missed. He'd been so focused on making the world better that he'd forgotten about his own world, the small circle of people who loved him not for what he was doing, but for who he was. He called his mother. It was late, but she answered on the second ring. "Darius? Baby, are you all right?" Her voice, warm, familiar, unchanging, nearly broke him. "I'm okay, Mom. I'm sorry I haven't called. I've been watching you on the news. I'm so proud of you, but I'm also worried." "Why?" "Because you look tired. Not just physically, but spiritually, like you're carrying too much." DJ closed his eyes. His mother had always been able to see through him, to know when he was hurting, even when he tried to hide it. "I'm carrying a lot," he admitted, "but I can't put it down. Not yet." "Nobody's asking you to put it down, baby. Just asking you to let other people help carry it. You've got people who love you. Let us in." They talked for an hour. She told him about his father's retirement party, about his sister's new job, about neighborhood gossip and family drama. Normal things, small things, things that had nothing to do with justice or activism or changing the world. And for that 1 hour, DJ remembered what it felt like to be just Darius, not DJ the activist or Mr. Caldwell the CEO, just a son talking to his mother about life. When he finally hung up, he felt lighter somehow. Not fixed, but better. Enough to face tomorrow. The next 6 weeks were a whirlwind. Congress passed the Passenger Rights and Airline Accountability Act with bipartisan support, a rarity in an age of political polarization. The law required public reporting of all discrimination complaints, established federal oversight boards with enforcement power, and imposed massive fines on airlines that failed to meet compliance standards. Airlines scrambled to implement reforms before the law took effect. Training programs were overhauled, complaint processes were redesigned, oversight boards were established with real authority and diverse representation. But implementation wasn't smooth. There was resistance from middle management, from gate agents who resented being told how to do their jobs, from pilots who saw the reforms as political correctness run amok. There were stories of employees sabotaging the new systems, of supervisors pressuring subordinates to not report incidents, of subtle retaliation against whistleblowers. DJ and his team worked overtime to document these violations, to shine light on every attempt to undermine the reforms. Shauna's website became a clearinghouse for anonymous reports from airline employees who saw problems but feared speaking up. Dr. Mercer's support network expanded to include not just victims, but also employees struggling with the cultural shift. And slowly, painfully, things began to change. Not everywhere, not perfectly, but measurably. Complaints of discrimination decreased by 30% in the first quarter after the law took effect. Passenger surveys showed increasing confidence in airline accountability. And most importantly, stories started emerging of employees actually intervening when they witnessed bias, of managers taking complaints seriously, of systems working the way they were supposed to. But success brought new challenges. Other industries started reaching out, wanting to implement similar reforms. Hotels, restaurants, retail chains, they all saw the writing on the wall and wanted to get ahead of potential scandals. DJ's team couldn't handle the volume of requests. "We need to scale," Marcus said during a strategy meeting. "Right now, we're trying to be everything to everyone. We need to focus on what we do best and partner with organizations that can handle the rest." "What do we do best?" Shauna asked. "We shine light," DJ said. "We tell stories, we document patterns, we force institutions to confront their failures. That's our core competency. Everything else, the training, the oversight, the support services, that should be handled by people who specialize in those areas." "So we become a clearinghouse?" Dr. Mercer asked. "A hub that connects victims with the right resources?" "Exactly. We don't have to solve every problem ourselves. We just have to make sure every problem gets solved." They spent the next month building partnerships. The NAACP took over some of the training initiatives. The Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund handled complaints involving accessibility. CARE focused on religious discrimination. The ACLU provided legal support for complex cases. The Transit Justice Project became a nerve center, coordinating efforts across dozens of organizations, ensuring nothing fell through the cracks. It was exhausting work, but it was sustainable in a way their previous approach hadn't been. And DJ finally took Dr. Mercer's advice. He started saying no to some interviews, declining some speaking engagements, taking weekends off to visit his family. He went to his niece's birthday party and taught her how to ride a bike. He had dinner with his parents and listened to his father's stories about the old days. He called his college roommate and went to a Bulls game where they drank overpriced beer and yelled at referees and didn't talk about activism at all. It felt strange at first, almost guilty, like he was abandoning his responsibilities. But then he noticed something. When he came back to work after taking time off, he was sharper, more creative, more patient with his team. Rest wasn't a luxury. It was necessary for survival. One evening, as winter gave way to early spring, DJ sat in his apartment and opened his laptop. He'd been meaning to write something for weeks, not a press release or a legal brief, but something personal. A reflection on everything that had happened since that day on Flight 447. He stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then he started typing. 6 months ago, I was told to move to the back of a plane. It was humiliating, infuriating, and all too familiar, but what happened next wasn't familiar. Instead of swallowing my anger, I fought back. Instead of accepting that this was just how the world worked, I demanded better. And somehow, impossibly, people listened. But here's what I've learned. Individual acts of courage matter, but they're not enough. Systems don't change because one person speaks up. They change because that one person inspires others to speak up too. Because individuals become movements. Because stories become evidence. Because silence becomes too expensive to maintain. If you're reading this and you've experienced discrimination in an airport, a hotel, a store, anywhere, I want you to know something. Your story matters. Your dignity matters. And you don't have to fight alone. There are people like me, like Dr. Mercer, like Shauna, like thousands of others who are ready to stand with you. All you have to do is speak. He posted it on the Transit Justice website, not expecting much response. By morning, it had been shared 50,000 times. The comment section was full of people sharing their own stories, thanking him for giving them permission to be angry, promising to speak up the next time they witnessed injustice. And DJ realized that Dr. Mercer had been right about something else. This was bigger than him now. It would survive whether he did or not. He'd lit a match, But the fire was spreading on its own, carried by thousands of people who'd found their voices. He couldn't save everyone, but together they might actually change everything. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late April, 9 months after DJ had been removed from Flight 447. He was in his office reviewing quarterly reports when his assistant knocked on the door with an unusual expression, half excitement, half disbelief. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important." "Who is it?" "Gerald Kessler." DJ set down his coffee. He hadn't seen Kessler since the Senate hearing, though they'd exchanged a few emails about Atlantic's implementation progress. The man who walked into his office looked different from the CEO who'd presided over a billion-dollar airline. He was thinner, his hair grayer, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt instead of the power suits DJ remembered. But his eyes were clearer somehow, less burdened. "Mr. Caldwell," Kessler said, extending his hand. "Thank you for seeing me without notice." DJ shook his hand and gestured to a chair. "What brings you to Chicago?" Kessler sat down, and for a moment he just looked around the office, at the photographs on the walls, at the books on the shelves, at the view of the city skyline. Then he met DJ's eyes. "I wanted to tell you something in person, something I couldn't say in an email or a phone call." "I'm listening." "You destroyed my life. My career, my reputation, everything I'd built over 30 years. When this started, I hated you for it. I told myself you were vindictive, that you'd taken a minor incident and blown it out of proportion to serve your own agenda." DJ kept his expression neutral. "And now? Now I understand that you saved my life. Not my career, that was already rotten at the foundation. But my life, my soul, whatever you want to call it. I was dying slowly, becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone I couldn't respect, and you forced me to confront that. You made it impossible for me to hide anymore. I didn't do it for you. I know. That's what makes it real. You weren't trying to save me. You were trying to protect everyone else from people like me, but the side effect was that you gave me a chance to become someone better." DJ leaned back in his chair. "Why are you telling me this?" Kessler pulled out a folder from his bag and set it on the desk. "Because I want to help, really help, not just volunteer at the support center or give money. I want to use everything I learned running an airline, the systems, the processes, the institutional knowledge, to help you build something that prevents what happened from ever happening again." DJ opened the folder. Inside were detailed proposals for industry-wide reforms, accountability mechanisms, training frameworks. It was the work of months, maybe longer, all focused on creating systems that made discrimination structurally impossible rather than just socially unacceptable. "This is comprehensive," DJ said, scanning the pages. "I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make sure the next CEO doesn't make the same mistakes. If you'll let me." DJ studied Kessler carefully, looking for signs of self-interest or manipulation. What he saw instead was something he recognized from his own mirror on the hardest days. A man trying to atone for failures he couldn't erase, hoping that forward motion might somehow balance the scales. "I'll need to discuss this with my team," DJ said. "Some of them won't be comfortable working with you." "I understand. And if they decide against it, I'll respect that. But I had to try." "Why? You could retire quietly, live off your savings, disappear. Why put yourself back in the line of fire?" Kessler smiled sadly. "Because disappearing would be easier. And I've done the easy thing too many times already. For once, I'd like to do what's right, even if it's hard." After Kessler left, DJ called an emergency meeting with his core team. As expected, the reactions were mixed. Marcus was skeptical, worried about optics. Shauna was outraged, seeing it as an attempt by Kessler to rehabilitate his image. But Dr. Mercer surprised everyone. "We should accept his help," she said quietly. Shauna turned to her. "How can you say that? He's responsible for years of discrimination." "Exactly, which means he knows how these systems work better than almost anyone. He knows where the loopholes are, where leadership hides accountability, where good intentions get lost in bureaucracy. That knowledge is valuable." "It's also tainted," Shauna insisted. "Everything he touches will be associated with what he did. It'll undermine our credibility." "Our credibility comes from results, not purity," Dr. Mercer said. If Kessler can help us create systems that actually work, systems that protect passengers and hold airlines accountable, then we should use him. Redemption has to mean something. Otherwise, we're just punishing people forever with no possibility of change. A DJ watched them debate, understanding both sides. Finally, he spoke. We're going to pilot this. Kessler will work with us on one specific project, developing an industry-wide complaint tracking system. If it works, if he proves himself trustworthy and useful, we'll consider expanding the partnership. If not, we part ways. But we document everything, and we're transparent about his involvement. No hiding, no spin. And if people criticize us for working with him, Marcus asked, then we explain our reasoning and let them decide. We can't control what people think. We can only control what we do. The vote was close. 3 in favor, 2 against, with several abstentions. But it was enough. They brought Kessler in as a consultant, and despite the initial tension, his contributions proved invaluable. He understood the corporate mindset in ways activists didn't, could predict where resistance would come from and how to neutralize it. Within 6 weeks, they developed a prototype system that tracked complaints across the entire industry, flagged patterns, and automatically triggered investigations when thresholds were crossed. But the real test came when they had to sell it to other airlines, and that's where things got complicated. The industry had split into 2 camps. One group, led by carriers that had already implemented serious reforms, saw the complaint tracking system as protection. If they were doing things right, transparency would prove it. But another group resisted fiercely, seeing it as government overreach and a threat to their autonomy. They hired lobbyists, funded think tanks to write position papers about regulatory burden, and quietly pressured politicians to oppose any mandatory implementation. DJ found himself back in Washington, this time meeting with the Department of Transportation. The secretary, a former governor named Catherine Reeves, had built her political career on consumer protection. She was sympathetic but cautious. I want to support this, she told DJ during a private meeting in her office. But I need bipartisan backing, and right now half of Congress thinks you're a hero and half thinks you're a threat to free enterprise. With all due respect, Madam Secretary, this isn't about free enterprise. It's about civil rights. I agree. But politics is about coalition building. If I push this too hard, I lose support for other initiatives. I need you to help me build consensus. How? By showing that this system doesn't just protect passengers, it protects airlines too. From lawsuits, from PR disasters, from the kind of crisis that destroyed Atlantic's stock price. Make the business case as strongly as you've made the moral case. DJ returned to Chicago frustrated but understanding her logic. He gathered his team and laid out the challenge. They needed to prove that accountability was profitable, not just right. Marcus took the lead on this, analyzing financial data from airlines that had implemented strong reforms versus those that hadn't. The results were striking. Airlines with robust complaint systems and transparent accountability had higher customer satisfaction scores, lower employee turnover, and better stock performance than their competitors. Turns out that treating people with dignity was good for business. They packaged the research into a presentation and took it directly to airline CEOs. Not through congressional testimony or media campaigns, but through quiet boardroom meetings where they spoke the language of quarterly earnings and shareholder value. Some executives were receptive, others remained hostile. But slowly, the resistance began to crack. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Southwest Airlines, which had largely stayed out of the controversy, announced they were voluntarily implementing the complaint tracking system. Their CEO, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been with the company for 20 years, held a press conference explaining why. "We're doing this because it's smart business," she said. "Discrimination is expensive. It costs us customers. It costs us talent. It costs us reputation. By being transparent about complaints and addressing them quickly, we protect our brand and our bottom line. This isn't charity. It's strategy." Within a month, Delta and JetBlue followed, then United, then American. The holdouts found themselves isolated, their resistance looking less like principle and more like stubborn denial. By summer, every major airline had agreed to implement the system. But DJ knew that policy victories didn't automatically translate to cultural change. The systems were in place, but would people use them? Would airlines actually follow through when cameras weren't watching? To test this, Shauna organized what she called accountability audits. Volunteers, passengers from diverse backgrounds, would fly on various airlines and document their experiences, not looking for problems necessarily, but observing how crew members treated different passengers, how complaints were handled, whether the reforms were real or performative. The first round of audits produced mixed results. Some airlines had genuinely transformed their cultures. Flight attendants intervened when they witnessed bias. Gate agents verified tickets without profiling. Complaints were taken seriously and resolved quickly, but other airlines had simply gone through the motions, implementing the letter of the reforms while ignoring the spirit. One incident stood out. A volunteer named Marcus Okonkwo, a Nigerian-American software engineer, was flying to Houston on a regional carrier when a flight attendant told him he couldn't sit in his assigned seat because it was being held for someone else. Marcus, trained by Shauna's team, calmly pulled out his phone and started recording. He asked for the attendant's name, requested to speak to a supervisor, and noted the time and flight number. The attendant's demeanor changed instantly. She apologized, checked his boarding pass again, and confirmed he was in the correct seat. No argument, no escalation, just immediate correction. After the flight, Marcus filed a report through the airline's new complaint system. Within 48 hours, he received a personal call from a regional manager, apologizing for the incident and explaining what steps were being taken to ensure it didn't happen again. When Shauna shared this story during a team meeting, DJ felt something shift in his chest. Not triumph exactly, but hope. The system had worked. Not perfectly. The initial discrimination shouldn't have happened. But it had worked. Marcus hadn't been removed from the plane, his complaint had been taken seriously, and there had been accountability. This is what success looks like, Dr. Mercer said. Not perfection, but process. Not the absence of bias, but the presence of consequences. Still, DJ knew they couldn't declare victory and move on. The work was ongoing, requiring constant vigilance. Every week brought new challenges, new attempts to undermine the reforms, new examples of old patterns reasserting themselves. One evening in September, DJ was working late in his office when his phone rang. It was Kevin Tran, the engineer who'd testified before Congress about being profiled repeatedly by TSA. DJ, I need to tell you something, Kevin said, his voice thick with emotion. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. That's what I need to tell you. I flew today, Chicago to San Francisco, and for the first time in 5 years I wasn't pulled aside for extra screening. The TSA agent was professional, efficient, and respectful. And when I got to my seat, first class, because I finally stopped being too scared to book it, the flight attendant welcomed me by name and asked if I needed anything. Kevin's voice broke. It was such a small thing, such a normal thing. But I almost cried because I couldn't remember the last time I felt normal, like I belonged, like I wasn't automatically suspicious just for existing. DJ felt his own throat tighten. I'm glad, Kevin. Really glad. I know there's still work to do. I know not every airline, not every employee has changed. But today, for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like maybe the world is getting better. And I wanted to thank you for that. After they hung up, DJ sat in his dark office, looking out at the city lights. He thought about all the moments that had led here. The humiliation on Flight 447. The decision to fight instead of accept. The countless hours building coalitions, negotiating reforms, pushing back against resistance. The personal costs. The relationships neglected. The sleep lost. The weight of carrying other people's trauma. Was it worth it? Kevin's call answered that question. So did Amara's email last month, telling him her daughter had finally stopped having nightmares about being separated from her. So did the statistics showing discrimination complaints down 40% across the industry. So did the stories from employees who said they finally felt empowered to intervene when they witnessed bias. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better. Measurably, demonstrably better. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Turn on CNN. DJ grabbed the remote and switched on the TV. A news anchor was interviewing a young woman, maybe 25, wearing a hijab and speaking with quiet confidence. So you're saying the flight attendant actually defended you? The anchor asked. Yes, another passenger made a comment about my hijab, said something about terrorism. Before I could even respond, the flight attendant stepped in. She told the other passenger that harassment wouldn't be tolerated, that if he continued, he'd be removed from the flight. And then she checked on me, made sure I was okay, offered to move me to a different seat if I'd feel more comfortable. And this was on Atlantic Airways? Yes, the same airline that's been in the news for discrimination. I was actually nervous about flying with them because of the stories, but the crew was incredible. They made me feel safe. The anchor turned to face the camera. This is just one example of the cultural shift happening across the airline industry following the reforms spearheaded by businessman and activist Darius Caldwell. While challenges remain, passenger advocacy groups report significant improvements in how complaints are handled and how diverse passengers are treated. DJ's phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Mercer. "Did you see it?" she asked. "I saw it. That flight attendant. Her name is Rebecca Torres. She went through the new training program, the one Kessler helped design. She told a reporter afterward that 6 months ago she wouldn't have known how to intervene. She would have been scared of making things worse or offending the other passenger, but the training gave her tools, language, confidence. It gave her permission to do what was right. One person at a time, DJ said. One person at a time, Dr. Mercer agreed. That's how you change the world. The following month, DJ received an invitation to speak at a conference on corporate accountability. He almost declined. He'd been traveling too much, and his mother had been asking when he'd visit again. But the conference was in Atlanta, and the keynote speaker was someone he needed to hear. Congressman John Lewis's former chief of staff, a civil rights veteran named Dorothy Mills who'd been fighting discrimination since the 1960s. DJ sat in the audience and listened as Dorothy spoke about the long arc of justice, about victories that took decades and setbacks that felt crushing. She talked about the freedom rides, about sitting at segregated lunch counters, about the exhausting, dangerous work of demanding equality when the entire system was designed to deny it. Young people today, she said, her voice still strong at 76, they think change happens fast. They see videos go viral, they watch companies make statements, and they think the battle is won. But institutional change is slow, it's grinding. It requires generations of people pushing, refusing to accept the way things are, imagining how things could be. She looked out at the audience, and her eyes found DJ. But every so often, someone comes along who accelerates that timeline, who takes decades of frustrated energy and channels it into something concrete, who doesn't just protest injustice, but builds alternatives. That's what happened in the airline industry this year. One man's refusal to accept humiliation became a movement, and that movement became policy. And that policy is saving lives. After her speech, Dorothy found DJ in the hallway. "Walk with me," she said, linking her arm through his. They walked through the conference center, past booths promoting various causes and organizations. "You're tired," Dorothy observed. It wasn't a question. "I am." "Good. That means you're doing real work, the kind that costs something. But you need to know when to rest and when to pass the torch." "I'm not ready to stop." "I didn't say stop. I said rest and prepare the next generation. You've built something remarkable, but it won't survive if it depends entirely on you. You need to train others, empower them to lead, and learn to step back when they're ready." "How did you know when to step back?" Dorothy smiled. "I didn't. Someone younger and smarter pushed me out of the way and took the microphone, and I was offended for about 5 minutes. Then I realized they were doing exactly what I'd trained them to do, refusing to wait for permission to lead." They stopped at a window overlooking the Atlanta skyline. DJ thought about his team, Shauna, who'd become a national voice on passenger rights, Marcus, who was being courted by policy think tanks, the volunteers who ran the complaint hotline and support network. They didn't need him anymore. Not really. They needed the platform and resources he'd built, but the actual work? They were doing it themselves. "I think I'm afraid," DJ admitted. "If I step back, what if everything falls apart? Then it was never as strong as you thought. But I don't think that's what will happen. I think you'll step back and discover you built something that can stand without you. And that will be your greatest accomplishment." That conversation stayed with DJ through the holidays and into the new year. He started deliberately pulling back, declining interviews so Shauna could speak instead, letting Marcus handle negotiations with airlines, trusting Dr. Mercer to expand the support network without his input. It felt wrong at first, like abandonment, but gradually he saw what Dorothy had meant. The movement wasn't weakening without his constant involvement. It was growing stronger, becoming less dependent on any single person, more resilient to attack or opposition. In February, Atlantic Airways released its annual discrimination report, the first company required to do so under the new federal regulations. The data showed complaints were down 72% from the previous year. Resolution times had dropped from an average of 6 months to 3 weeks, and passenger satisfaction scores were the highest in the company's history. Other airlines released similar reports, with varying degrees of success. Some showed dramatic improvements. Others revealed ongoing problems that triggered federal investigations. But the transparency itself was revolutionary. For the first time, passengers could make informed decisions about which airlines to trust with their business and their dignity. DJ was reading through these reports on a Saturday morning when his doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment he considered ignoring it. But curiosity won out. When he opened the door, he found a teenager standing on his porch. The kid was maybe 17, black, wearing a hoodie and carrying a backpack. For a moment, DJ saw himself at that age, full of anger and hope in equal measure, unsure how to channel either. "Are you Darius Caldwell?" the kid asked. "I am. My name is Jordan Mitchell. I need your help." DJ invited him in, made coffee, and listened to Jordan's story. He'd been flying to visit his grandmother in Memphis when a gate agent accused him of having a fake ID. Security was called. Jordan was detained for 2 hours, missed his flight, and spent the night in the airport. His grandmother died the next morning before he could get there. "I filed a complaint," Jordan said, his voice shaking. "Used the system you helped create. The airline apologized, refunded my ticket, offered me travel vouchers, but that doesn't bring my grandmother back. That doesn't give me those last hours with her." DJ felt the familiar weight of impossible grief. "No, it doesn't. I'm sorry. Everyone keeps saying I should be grateful, that at least there's a system now, at least they apologized, but I don't feel grateful. I feel angry, and I don't know what to do with that." DJ sat back, choosing his words carefully. "Your anger is valid. The system I helped build didn't save you. It couldn't, because systems can't undo the past, and they can't work fast enough to catch every instance of discrimination before it causes harm. All they can do is make harm less frequent and easier to address. So what's the point? The point is that your grandmother's death wasn't meaningless. Because you're here, you're speaking up, and you're making sure the next kid doesn't go through what you went through. That's how change happens. Not through systems alone, but through people who refuse to let their pain be invisible." Jordan wiped his eyes. "What do I do now?" "You tell your story. You hold the airline accountable. You join the movement and help make it stronger. Or you don't. You grieve. You heal. You live your life. Both paths are valid. But whatever you choose, you don't carry this alone." They talked for another hour. DJ gave Jordan his personal number, connected him with Dr. Mercer's support network, and promised to personally review his case. After Jordan left, DJ sat on his couch and let himself feel the full weight of what they'd accomplished and what they'd failed to prevent. They'd changed policies, shifted culture, created accountability where none existed before. But Jordan still lost his grandmother. Kevin still had panic attacks in airports. Amara's daughter still sometimes woke up crying. The system was better, but it wasn't healed. And it might never be. That evening, DJ called a meeting with his core team. They gathered at his apartment: Marcus, Shauna, Dr. Mercer, and a few others who'd become essential to the movement. "I've been thinking about something Dorothy Mills told me," DJ began, "about knowing when to step back, and I think it's time." The room went still. Shauna looked stricken. Marcus frowned. Dr. Mercer just nodded, as if she'd been expecting this. "I'm not abandoning the work," DJ continued, "but I'm also not the center of it anymore. Shauna, you're better at managing the website and the volunteer network than I ever was. Marcus, you understand the policy mechanics in ways I don't. Elaine, you've built a support system that's helping thousands of people. You don't need me looking over your shoulders." "So what will you do?" Marcus asked. "I'll stay involved, board member, consultant, whatever makes sense, but I'll also go back to running my company, Spending time with my family, living a life that isn't entirely defined by this fight, because if I don't, I'll burn out, and then I'll be useless to everyone. Shauna's eyes filled with tears. It feels like you're quitting. I'm not quitting. I'm transitioning. There's a difference. I lit a fire, but fires don't need the match to keep burning. They need fuel and air and people tending them. You're those people now. They talked late into the night, working through logistics and emotions. By the time everyone left, they had a plan. DJ would step down as the public face of the Transit Justice Project, but remain on the board. Leadership would be distributed among a team of 5, including Shauna and Dr. Mercer. And they'd launch a fellowship program to train the next generation of advocates, ensuring the movement could sustain itself for decades to come. 3 weeks later, DJ booked a flight to Chicago to Miami. He chose Atlantic Airways deliberately, curious to see if the changes were real or just performance. When he arrived at O'Hare, he wore jeans and a hoodie, the same outfit from that day 9 months ago. He checked in at a kiosk, went through security without incident, and walked to his gate. The agent scanned his boarding pass with a smile. "First class, Mr. Caldwell. Welcome aboard." He boarded early, settled into seat 1A, and watched other passengers file past. A family speaking Spanish, a woman in a hijab, a man using a wheelchair, a young black kid who looked nervous about flying. The crew treated each of them with the same professional courtesy, checking tickets without judgment, offering assistance without condescension. It was so ordinary, so beautifully, impossibly ordinary. The flight attendant, a woman named Sarah, whose name tag also bore a small rainbow pin, stopped at his seat. "Can I get you anything before we take off, Mr. Caldwell?" "I'm good, thank you." She smiled. "I just want to say, I went through the new training program, the one you helped create. It changed how I see this job. I used to think my job was just safety and service. Now I understand it's also about dignity, so thank you." DJ felt his throat tighten. "You're the one doing the work. But you're welcome." The plane took off smoothly. DJ closed his eyes and let the engine hum wash over him. He thought about everything that had changed in less than a year, about Gerald Kessler, now working quietly to help other companies implement accountability measures, about Kevin Tran, who'd sent him a photo last week of himself boarding a plane with a genuine smile, about Shauna, who was becoming a force in her own right, about Jordan Mitchell, who decided to join the movement and was already organizing students at his high school. He thought about his mother's words from months ago. Let other people help carry it. He'd finally learned how to do that, how to trust that the work would continue without him at the center, how to celebrate progress without ignoring ongoing problems, how to hold hope and grief simultaneously, knowing both were necessary for real change. When the plane landed in Miami, DJ gathered his things and walked through the airport. Nobody stared. Nobody questioned his presence. He was just another passenger, making his way through the world with dignity intact. His phone buzzed with a message from his sister. "Dad's birthday dinner tonight. You coming?" DJ smiled and typed back, "On my way." He stepped out into the Miami sunshine, feeling lighter than he had in months. The fight wasn't over. It would never be completely over. But for today, for this moment, he could rest. He could be Darius instead of DJ, a son instead of an activist, a man enjoying the warm air instead of a symbol of resistance. Because that's what Dorothy had meant about passing the torch. It wasn't about stopping the work. It was about understanding that the work was bigger than any one person, that movements needed rest and joy as much as they needed righteous anger, that sustainability required balance. DJ hailed a cab and gave the driver his parents' address. As they pulled away from the curb, he looked back at the airport terminal, the same terminal where this journey had begun, though it felt like a lifetime ago instead of 9 months. So much had changed: policies, practices, lives. But some things remained constant. The need for dignity, the power of collective action, the possibility that people could grow and institutions could transform, and the simple, radical truth that everyone, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from, deserved to be treated with respect. Not as a favor, not as progress, but as a fundamental right. The cab merged into traffic, carrying DJ toward his family, toward normalcy, toward whatever came next. Behind him, planes continued taking off and landing, carrying passengers who might never know his name but who benefited from his refusal to accept humiliation. That was enough. It had to be enough. Because change wasn't about one perfect victory. It was about thousands of small improvements, each one building on the last, each one making the world slightly more just than it had been before. And somewhere, right now, someone who looked like DJ was boarding a plane in first class, and nobody was telling them to move to the back. That was the promise kept. That was the work continued. That was the future they'd fought for, imperfect but real, still unfolding with every flight, every interaction, every choice to treat each other with the dignity we all deserved. The cab turned a corner and DJ let himself smile, not because everything was fixed, but because enough had changed to make the next fight possible. And the fight after that, and the one after that. The arc of justice was long, but today, just for today, DJ could feel it bending.